Yes, we did make it out of 2020, but we're not completely out of the woods yet. For one thing, we still have to file our 2020 taxes. And last year was like no other. And the 2021 tax season is a bit different too. And with April 15th fast approaching, we'll tell you everything you need to know. It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
Joining me right now is Sound Income Strategies founder and CEO David Scranton.
They've created a new type of inflation. And although markets have always been an emotional place, they seem to be even more of an emotional place these days.
Jeffrey Small, market watcher, is with me.
Stock market dynamic is getting ready to significantly change.
So let's bring in our co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services and also the brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store. Tax laws and guidelines actually change almost every year, but this year, the changes are more extensive. One reason is because of the pandemic. If you received extended unemployment benefits through the CARES Act, for example, those benefits are taxable, although the stimulus check that you may have received is not taxable. The CARES Act also changed rules around RMDs, required minimum distributions, as well as early withdrawals from your retirement accounts. And those changes may impact your taxes. Despite what you may think, the pandemic isn't the only reason for these changes this tax season. And we'll break it all down for you right here on today's show. Specifically, we'll talk about changes to tax brackets, tax deductions, tax credits, also tax rules around different types of coronavirus relief, and changes that impact retirement plans and investment strategies. We'll also share some last-minute tips you might be able to take advantage of. Joining me, of course, will be my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, along with author, speaker, and television host, Ed Slott. And later in the show, we'll talk to New Jersey tax specialist, Scott McLean, CEO of McLean Advisory Group. We also have some news we want to share with you all, our loyal audience. We're making some huge changes to the show. We're moving the income generation to a new home on a new network. We're also changing up the format to a new and improved look. Of course, we're sad to be leaving our Newsmax family after so many years, but we don't want you to miss out on any of our exclusive content while we figure out the future. So follow us on our YouTube channel, The Income Generation, where we will continue to post the show as well as interviews with all your favorite guests. You'll also be the first to know where and when our new and improved show will air. After, of course, we make that decision. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Income Generation. Now, back to the show. Let's start by going over some basics about tax season this year and talk about some of the deductions and credits that you might be able to take advantage of. One thing that's not different this year is the April 15th filing deadline. You must file your 2020 tax return by this date. Last year, of course, the deadline was extended due to the pandemic. Another important thing to be aware of are the updated tax brackets. Now, while the tax rates are the same as they were in 2019, the marginal brackets themselves have been adjusted upward by a few $100s to account for inflation. And the third most important thing to know is that the standard deduction has increased this year to $12,400 for single filers and $24,800 for married couples filing jointly. And that's important. Why? Because it helps you determine whether or not it makes sense to itemize. Of course, as you most likely know, if you do itemize, you calculate your deductions one by one. Itemizing, of course, is more work, but it's worth it if your itemized deductions exceed the standard deduction. Now, deductions help reduce how much of your income is subject to taxes, while tax credits lower your actual tax bill dollar for dollar. And your tax advisor can help you determine whether itemizing is your best option, as well as which specific deductions and/or tax credits might work for you. Now, some potential deductions you might claim for the 2021 tax season include charitable giving. In an effort to encourage more giving during the pandemic, the CARES Act allowed you to deduct up to 100% of your adjusted gross income, your AGI, in qualified charitable donations. Of course, that's only if you itemize. The CARES Act added a new above-the-line deduction that will help you write off up to $300 of charitable contributions that you made in cash. Next, medical deductions. If you spent a lot of time in the hospital or got hit with some big unreimbursed medical expenses last year, as is possible due to the pandemic, you might get some tax relief. This year, you can deduct any medical expenses above 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. So if your AGI was $100,000, you can deduct out-of-pocket medical expenses if they were above $7,500. But again, only if you itemize. You could also claim business deductions. If you're self-employed, there are several that you can claim, including travel expenses and the home office deduction if you used part of your home for the business. Unfortunately, if you're one of the millions who ended up working from home this year due to the pandemic, you can't claim the home office deduction since it's reserved for self-employed individuals. And of course, the right tax specialist can help you identify all of the deductions and credits you might be eligible for and which would work best for you. So right now, I'd like to welcome my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, a retirement income store in Melbourne, Florida. Jeff is also author of the Amazon best-selling book, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. Jeff, as usual, good to see you.
Dave, it's great to see you guys again. I guess we've got a special guest today. Tell us who it is.
We do have a special guest, absolutely. And that is a good friend of the income generation, Ed Slott, author, public speaker, television host. Ed's been called the best source for IRA advice by the Wall Street Journal and America's IRA expert by Mutual Fund magazine. Ed, great to have you back to the show.
Great to be back.
So it's that time again. It seems like you just file your taxes and you have to do it again. But this time it seems even closer together because we had an extension last year. So what's your best simple advice for people this year when they file, really just coming up in the next 2 months?
Yeah, well, there's a big difference between tax preparation and tax planning. When people say, what should they do? It's already done. The average tax preparer, I like to say, and that's a lot of my colleagues, unfortunately, CPAs, a lot of tax preparers are just history teachers. They tell you what already happened. You come in, oh, look what you did. Oh, you should have done that. Oh, if you only could have done that. So you get this woulda, coulda, shoulda. You should be looking forward or at least learn from the woulda, coulda, shouldas last year. Yeah. But last year, 2020, was a different kind of year. Lots of incomes may have been cut. There's lots of transition, retirement, loss of job, who knows? So it's hard to predict this year compared to last year. Hopefully this year things are getting better. But one of the things that's a common item, about the only item you could change now from last year, is to make sure you're maximizing your IRA and Roth IRA contributions. That's one of the few things you still have up to April 15th this year to change last year. And a big study just came out from ICI and saying most people are not maximizing their Roth IRA and IRA contributions because they don't know all the ways they can.
No, that's a really good point, Ed. And so on that note, though, what are some of the biggest concerns you're hearing from folks in the income generation that are 55 or older about their retirement plans as a result of the pandemic or what the future is financially for our country in taxes?
Well, I don't know what the taxes are. I'll give you some thoughts on that. But what I'm hearing from estate planning attorneys all over the country, and I train lots of them in our programs, their business, according to all of them, is booming. People are worried. People are sick. They're worried about getting sick. People are dying, and they want to make sure their affairs are in order. Now, it's sad that the pandemic finally was the call to action. People needed to deal with things they should have been dealing with all along. So that's what I see happening. People updating their estate plans, their beneficiary forms. Some people haven't looked at these things in years. In fact, when I check beneficiary forms for people, I notice lots of the beneficiaries listed are dead. That's not going to help. That means these things haven't been looked at in years. Now, on the yeah, go ahead.
That's a really great point, Ed. The CARES Act that passed December of 2020 or 19, whenever it passed, took away the stretch IRA, one of the largest exemptions in the tax code. So what do we do now?
Well, there are alternative solutions, and that's where checking beneficiary forms would let you know, oh, I named this trust as a beneficiary. That may not work under the Secure Act. because it eliminated the stretch IRA. So if you have a large IRA and plan to leave it to a child, a grandchild, they're not going to be able to stretch it 50, 60 years anymore. They'll probably be stuck with a 10-year rule. They might want to look at Roth conversions or getting funds into a permanent life insurance policy. I think that's a better alternative than the stretch IRA. The IRAs have been downgraded. Insurance and anything tax-free has been upgraded because you can do more. You can leave more and have more control and less tax.
Yep. And Ed, those are great points. We want to ask you about Roths after the break, the rich man's IRA, the overfunded life insurance after the break. But right now, we need to take a quick break. Stay with us, please. You stay with us, too. We have much more coming up in a moment from Ed Slott right here on The Income Generation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Income Generation. I'm here with Jeff Small and also our special guest, a friend of The Income Generation, Ed Slott, author, public speaker, television host, who just before the break told us, number one, make sure you get your estate planning in order. That's a big demand today. Check those beneficiaries. And also, you have till April 15th to fund an IRA. And now that's even available if you're over age 72.
So, Ed, you are one of the most refreshing consumer advocates out there because you're unbiased and you're objective and you tell the truth. You've got your new book coming out, and it's called The New Retirement Savings Time Bomb. It's coming out in a few weeks. Tell us where folks can get your book and give us some highlights about your book.
Well, I call it the New Retirement Savings Time Bomb because of all the new tax laws and Congress's insatiable need for money from your retirement accounts. There are more and even new, more severe threats to your retirement savings. Remember, most people have most of their life savings in IRAs, 401ks. These funds have not yet been taxed. And that's the key. The taxes are building, growing, unpaid debt, compounding in their IRAs. At some point, the bill's going to come due. And the last thing you want is when you need it for retirement, for that bill to come due and tax rates be jacked up back to 30, 40, 50%. Who knows? Given our debt and deficit numbers, that's very likely. So I go through an actual 5-step plan, very easy 5-step plan, a complete action plan to help you make sure that your IRAs and 401ks and other retirement savings are not depleted by taxes by the time you need them in retirement. Now, it's called the New Retirement Savings Time Bomb. You can learn about it on my website, IRA Help, IRAHELP, IRAHelp.com, or just type in my name, Ed Slott, to Amazon or wherever you get books. I hate to mention one company, but is there another company? I don't even know.
No, I think Amazon's going to swallow them all up. But you're exactly right, Ed. From our viewers and our listeners' perspective, they put away money while they're working on a pre-tax basis. They get a deduction for it. It grows without tax. And then, boom, the time bomb hits. All that money grew, but it also grew, what else? The tax. And so tell us about how your book is going to help consumers. How is your book going to help alleviate that tax?
Well, I draw attention to the biggest problems, and I do it in a fun way. I go through the 5 steps, the timing, the securing. Roth is even a chapter on alternatives to the stretch IRA, like Roth, life insurance, and an overall estate plan. So you have a complete plan. It is something in it for everybody. It's even great for financial advisors to use with their clients because there's a lot of good checklist type advice items in there.
So it sounds like your book is going to teach people how to keep the money in the family versus giving it to Uncle Sam.
Yeah, the plan you make will determine how much you keep and how much goes to the government. You want to keep more and pay less. You ever hear that saying, less is more? You ever hear that saying?
Yes.
Yeah, well, less is not more. Less is less, except when it comes to taxes. The less you pay, the more you keep. And to keep more and pay less, you have to have a plan, which almost nobody does. That's what my book does for you. It's the New Retirement Savings Time Bomb.
Dave, I can't wait to get that book. I bet you can't either.
No, I'm going to be, you and I will be 2 of the first readers. That's for sure. So, obviously there's a lien that the government has on all these retirement plans, and we get that. And as tax rates go up in general, that means the government gets a bigger chunk of the money. When you take a withdrawal, you get a smaller chunk. But the question, and one thing they've done recently by eliminating the stretch out beneficiary designation and eliminating it to really a 10-year payout has really increased the government share, potentially decreased your heirs' share. But do you ever think they would be bold enough to actually have a different set of tax rates for IRA distributions that might even be higher than tax rates for earned income?
I think they're going to trim around the edges. And this gets back to what Jeff asked before about what do I think about future tax changes. I don't think you're going to see anything earth-shattering. First of all, there are other priorities, and you have a 50-50 Senate. So anything extreme is just not going to pass. So I would say, even if they pass something, it probably won't be effective till next year. By the time they get around to it, it might be later in the year. The longer they go, the less likely it is that anything they do will be retroactive. So you still have this year, today's low tax rates in 2021, to take advantage of a lot of these strategies, which can help you have more, keep more, and make it last.
So your best crystal ball, 30 years from now, do you think that we'll still have a step up in basis on non-IRA assets, or do you think that's one of the things that might go away? And for the viewers, step up in basis is simply where if you have a stock or real estate that's appreciated in value, it's basically a tax forgiveness of all those capital gains for your heirs when you're gone. Do you think we're going to have that, or is that a way the government could come in and essentially increase their share of the pie?
It's too extreme. It'll never happen. And I don't know if you know this, but 2021 is the 100th anniversary of Step Up in Basis. It started in 1921. And many times over that 100 years, several times, we had these same exact arguments. In fact, if you look back in the history in the war and before the war and after World War II, and anytime there was an event, they always went and came back with the same arguments for and against, and nothing ever happened. The closest they ever came, and they never touched Step Up in Basis, the closest they ever came with dealing with long-term capital gain rates was in the 80s for about 2 or 3 years. If you remember, there was at one time that the capital gain rate on long-term sales was the same as ordinary income. And even that died out after about 2 or 3 years. It's too entrenched. It would be too much of a shock to the system. And think about homeowners who held, and that was one of the big reasons to keep it. They were worried about people that had appreciation in their homes, and then they go and sell the home they had invested in for 40 years and then get hit with a giant tax. So that was the beginning of it. Of course, it helped Wall Street and all of that. But I think you'll see more trimming around the edges. Nothing as extreme as that.
All right, I love it. As usual, some great words of wisdom. So go out and buy the new Retirement Savings Time Bomb so you can learn more from today's guest, our good friend, Ed Slott. Ed, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, we've already discussed some of the ways in which coronavirus relief has affected rules on tax credits and tax deductions. But what are some of the other impacts you're probably thinking? Well, that depends on who you are and how much of that relief you've received directly. As you know, the CARES Act included stimulus checks of up to $1,200 sent to most Americans. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, the good news is that your stimulus check does not count as taxable income. Instead, it's being treated like a refundable tax credit, basically like an advance on the money you would have received as part of your 2021 tax refund. On the other hand, if you were laid off or furloughed during the pandemic and you had to take advantage of the CARES Act's extended unemployment benefits, well then yes, you'll need to pay income tax on that money, as you do with any unemployment benefits. The CARES Act also tried to help small businesses stay afloat. How? By offering them loans through the Paycheck Protection Program. And these loans were designed to be forgiven, but provided that they're used for certain business expenses such as payroll, rent, and utilities. Now, if you have a small business and you took advantage of the program, you probably already know that any eligible expenses you paid with this money, that is the money from a PPP loan, can be deducted from your taxable income. However, you'll need to get your loan forgiveness application approved by the SBA as part of the process. Now, there's also information you should be aware of if higher education was part of your pandemic experience. either for yourself or for your children. Any money that you withdraw from a 529 plan or educational savings account must be used for qualified education expenses for them to be tax-free. Now, since a lot of schools went remote or canceled classes last year, they may have refunded all or part of your 529 or ESA money. And if so, be aware that you had only a 60-day window to put that money back into the account or to use it to cover other educational expenses. Because if you didn't, you may not only have to pay income tax on the amount, but also a withdrawal penalty. And coming up after the break, we'll talk about some of the potential impacts of the 2021 tax season that it could have on your retirement plan. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on the Income Generation. Welcome back to the Income Generation. It's great to be here with you all. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there are big changes in the next few weeks. We're updating and improving the format. We're also going to be airing the Income Generation on a new network. So in the meantime, subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Income Generation, so that you can still get all the exclusive content. You're also going to be able to be the first to know when and where the new show will air. Okay, back to the show. Let's talk more about how the 2021 tax season could potentially impact your retirement plan. Hopefully, this induced recession due to the pandemic didn't force you to have to dip into your retirement savings to pay bills, because for many Americans, it did. Now, recognizing the potential for this, Congress included a provision in the CARES Act, a provision that allowed people under the age of 59 and a half to take up to $100,000 out of a 401k or out of an IRA before the end of 2020 without receiving an early withdrawal penalty. Nevertheless, the CARES Act does not allow you to waive the income tax on that withdrawal, meaning you'll have to account for the tax itself on your 2020 return. It's just the early withdrawal penalty that got waived. And that's just one way in which the rules around retirement plans changed last year in 2020. Last year was also the first in which the SECURE Act, which stands for Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement, had been in place. And it also prompted several changes. For example, as many of you know, it pushed the age for taking required minimum distributions, RMDs, up from 70 and a half years old to age 72. In addition, the CARES Act allowed all Americans to skip their RMDs completely in 2020 without penalty. And that's huge, and it could mean a significant tax savings this year for many people, since the money taken out of your traditional IRA counts as taxable income. Now, another change prompted by the SECURE Act is that starting last year, it eliminated the age limit for contributing to a traditional IRA, which had been 70 and a half. Since the money you put in a traditional IRA is tax deductible, you may now be able to lower some of your taxable income this year for 2020. And remember, you have up till April 15th to make that IRA contribution for most of you. And of course, don't forget that ultimately you're going to have to pay taxes on that IRA money whenever you take it out. That's why I always stress that having the right strategy to satisfy RMDs can be one of the most important elements in your retirement plan, something we'll be discussing more in just a few minutes. But getting back to this tax season, you should also be aware of some good news. If you were forced to take some money out of a 401k or traditional IRA this year and now find yourself facing a big tax bill, you have a window of 3 years to put that money back into the account. And if you do, you'll receive a refund on any taxes that you paid on it. And even more importantly, it will mean your retirement plan actually is back on track. And of course, you might have guessed, as always, the right financial advisor can help you make sure that it's the right plan to suit your goals, your situation, and your risk tolerance. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring back my good friend and co-host, Jeff, and talk more about the 2021 tax season right here on the Income Generation. Did you know that the Retirement Income Store publishes its own newsletter? Each month, we share helpful information about the financial markets, research reports, and other resources to help you navigate the complexities of planning and saving for retirement. And we want to help make 2021 the year that you achieve and maintain your financial fitness. We're offering our loyal Income Generation viewers and listeners a complimentary 12-month trial subscription to the newsletter. So don't delay. This offer is only available for a limited period of time. Visit areyouFinanciallyFit.com to claim your free 1-year subscription. Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jeff Small. So Jeff, I have to tell you, I feel bad because so much of the country this past week has been frozen solid, snowstorms, ice storms, no power. And you're coming on television with a nice tan, and I'm actually coming on television with an 100% sunburn. So I kind of feel bad for our audience this particular week.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, almost getting heat stroke in the Keys on Saturday when it was like 88 degrees, Dave. But this weather's been incredible down here, but I do feel bad for the rest of the country.
I know. And what I'm really sad about, as I know you are too, is although this is not the end of the Income Generation, as we find a new home and as we have a new and improved format, but I am kind of sad because this is the last time we'll be on the air with our Newsmax family for the Income Generation.
Yeah, Dave, unfortunately, this will be our last show, and I'm melancholy about it too, but the reality is it's a stepping stone to the next prelude of the evolutionary success of the show, The Income Generation. And so we want to keep conveying that message out because the consumers need to hear it.
Yeah, and really not just success of the show, but really the need for income. You know, as asset values go up in almost everything, whether it's real estate, whether it's the investment markets, the stock market. One of our very own portfolios, just a few months ago, stock portfolio had a 5% dividend yield, and the stocks have gone up so much that it's actually down under 4.5 now. So it's harder and harder for investors to get income, and that's why the things that we share here are just gaining in popularity, and I assume they're going to continue to gain as we can help people over the course of the years in terms of learning really how to maximize the cash flow they can get from their hard-earned savings.
Yeah, income is the key. We know that, but we'll keep marching on. We'll keep pushing out the message and educating the consumers no matter where we land for the next stage of, the show going forward, Dave.
And, it's interesting, Jeff, because Ed Slott said it's not about what you make, it's what you keep, right? Minimizing taxes is part of it. In a few minutes, we're going to have on New Jersey-based tax specialist Scott McLean, our good friend. I'm interested to see what Scott says about generating income also in portfolios. But taxes. We talked to Ed, but you're talking to people every single day. What's the biggest number one question you're hearing today, or maybe lack of understanding you're hearing about today from your clients as far as the tax world is concerned?
Well, as far as taxes go, everyone's been getting ready for taxes, but the biggest question today is that I hear every day practically is, should I start converting my IRA? So consumers to a Roth, should I do a Roth conversion? So consumers are keenly aware of the fact that the IRAs are a tax time bomb, just like Ed had referred to, and that at some point they need to start converting a portion of that money, either to a Roth or some other conversion method to create a tax-free asset versus a taxable. So that is their biggest concern right now, Dave. That's what I'm hearing the most.
And I said we'd go back and we'd ask Ed about that, and we talked a lot about his book and everything. We never really got specifically to that part of it. But I think you're right. I think 2022 is the year where the Biden administration is likely to raise taxes, and although it won't affect everyone, it'll affect some people. So 2021 is probably the year of the Roth conversion. It's the year for people to look at it and consider it. And especially if they've got some more room to go in their existing tax bracket, or if they know that RMDs are going to be kicking in a few years, force them into a higher bracket, then to me, those are good symptoms to look for somebody who might be a good candidate for Roth conversions. You concur? I
agree. And RMDs is another area where folks are confused because they keep changing the rules, Dave.
Yeah, and you're right. But again, the thing I don't want to forget about or lose sight of here is that the single most important thing with RMDs is that you're generating those from interest and dividends, not taking them out of principal. And I stress that all the time. I can't stress enough. Maybe we'll ask Scott McLean about that, our next guest. But at the end of the day, yeah, you could pay a little less in tax if you do some sophisticated tax planning. But the real fear with RMDs is that you deplete that IRA down significantly, possibly to zero, if you live to a ripe old age. And that's why taking those RMDs out of interest and dividends and not out of principal, I still think is the number one thing. So let's take our quick commercial break. And as soon as we come back, I'm looking forward to having Scott McLean join us to ask him those questions. Stay with us. Jeff and I will be right back here on the Income Generation. Welcome back to the Income Generation. It's great to have you all here. And although we talk about it often, I want to take just a couple minutes today to talk about required minimum distributions just one more time. As I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest changes prompted by the CARES Act has to do with RMDs, which of course were waived last year in 2020. Thanks to that provision, along with the Secure Act, many people who would otherwise be dealing with RMDs on the tax return they're about to file are actually getting a break this year. But it's only a temporary break. Even if you may not have to start dealing with RMDs for another 5 to 10 years, that doesn't mean you should put off preparing for them. Having the right strategy to satisfy these RMD, these forced government withdrawals, can be one of the most important elements of a successful retirement plan. RMDs start at just about 4% per year. That's 4% of your IRA or 401k balance, and the percentage increases each year as you get older. And the penalty for not taking sufficient RMDs, as many of you know, is a whopping 50%. Now, as I've explained before, once you've properly calculated which RMDs will be, the most important thing to consider is whether you have the right asset allocation to satisfy them. What does that mean? Well, in my experience, it means that an allocation which can generate at least 4% in an interest or dividend payment. I don't mean return or growth, I mean an interest or dividend payment. Because if you're earning less than that, you may be at risk of not only cannibalizing your principal to satisfy RMDs, but also of increasing the tax burden that they might create year after year. Here's the bottom line. Even if the current crisis or the Secure Act has given you some additional time before RMDs kick in, the sooner you adopt a sound strategy for satisfying them, the better. And that means a strategy that helps minimize your tax burden and helps reduce your risk of spending on principal. The kind of strategy an advisor who specializes in retirement income can help you with. Now let's bring back in my co-host Jeff Small, as well as our next guest, Scott McLean. He's CEO of McLean Advisory Group and has over 35 years experience in financial services. Scott's also the host of Financial Insanity, a weekly educational radio show that you can hear on WBNJ. Scotty, thanks so much for being with us today on the Income Generation.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for asking me. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us, are people more nervous this year about their taxes in light of everything else they've been through in 2020?
I think they're nervous about the stimulus. Is it taxed or not taxed? They're nervous about, can they get out of their house? What do they do with the money? They're kind of concerned about the whole thing. Taxes are taxes. There's new changes, but I think overall, it's just another tax year. They need help. They need guidance.
So, Scotty, what are some of the most common questions you're hearing this year, this tax season, from your clients in the Income Generation?
Stimulus check, taxation. How come I didn't get my stimulus check? How do they work the numbers? Should I do anything different? Should I convert to Roths? They're concerned about the new president and his tax rules. Are they going to go up? What's going to happen? How should they do Roth conversions now versus later if the tax rule changes? So there are some concerns out there, Jeff.
You heard, of course, what Ed Slott said just a moment ago. So what do you think? Do you think tax brackets are going to go up? Taxes are going to change in the Biden administration in 2021? Or do you think they're going to have enough common sense to wait until we're through the pandemic a bit more before that happens?
If he doesn't forget that he's got to focus on so many other things. I would hope, as you stated, Dave, he'll put that off till 2022, 2021. I think he's got so many other things on his plate that he's trying to fix or adjust or revamp that I hope, for our sakes, our clients' sakes, that he puts it off, because that's going to really be a left hook to the economy and to families.
Sure. Hey, and I know you could talk for hours about this, but in the final minute we have left in this segment, tell us about your motivation for your book, The Three Blind Mice.
Well, my motivation was you, Dave, because you said, Scott, people need to know the information. They need to know the basics, the traps that the financial planners are not telling their clients. I think you were the big motivation, saying, Scotty, get this thing out, which is how the financial industry is leading people to a mousetrap. And I think not working with your accountant, your financial planner, and your lawyer, working together in consortium is wonderful. It's almost like having your cars in alignment. The wheels are in alignment, better gas mileage, better efficiency, and no wear and tear. Now, people are not paying attention to that. And so I'm thanking you for encouraging me to finish up the book. And it was a great hit like Jeff's. Jeff was a tremendous seller and great information. So thank you for allowing me to share that. People need to speak to their advisors, the accountant, the lawyer, and the financial planner together in consortium.
Yep, great advice. And it's all your words of wisdom. I'm glad I was able to encourage you to get it all down out of your head and into print. So don't go away, Scott. When we come back, we're going to change the subject and talk a little bit about earning interest on your money, the financial markets, and a lot more with Scott McLean. We'll be right back in a moment, right here on The Income Generation. Welcome back to The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and I'm here with my co-host Jeff Small, as well as our good friend Scott McLean, CEO of McLean Advisory Group.
Scott, it's great to see you. I hope you are staying warm in New Jersey. I know you guys are going through a bitter cold.
Don't rub it in like that. Come on, Jeff. That's not fair.
That's not nice. Come on.
Well, okay. Listen, warm wishes to you from Florida.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's redirect here and focus on the show on the income generation. So, Scott, one of the things that we like to discuss on this show is how retirees and pre-retirees can create income and make the shift from growth to conservation and income. How do you do that for your customers?
Education, Jeff, educating them on going from the growth to the income sector. As old as I am, at 62, heading to 63, we grew up in a time when the market was screaming in the 80s, and we kind of stay in that mode. The market took off, then it had a couple left hooks, 2000 and 2007. And yet, had you invested, let's say, in a treasury in 2000, it was about 6.5%. No risk, no worries. Today, people are worried. The market's sizzling right now. Are they sizzling because of the growth, because of the G? Or as David saying, or is it the I, the income from dividends and interest? And by getting people to educate them how to get dividends and interest and get their mind off of just growth, that is the challenge. And I think if people are really concerned and really want to understand what they're doing, this is what I would tell them to focus on, which is why you have a wonderful show, Jeff.
So, Scotty, what are the investments, the tools, the programs that we utilize to create income today? What do you like for your clients? How do we create income for our clients?
We're creating income, obviously, as you've been teaching and in your wonderful book you put out, by dividends and interest. And dividends obviously come in several manners, whether they're preferred stocks, you can get them. You can get growth stocks with dividends, but not as much. You can get bonds. So there's tools out there in the tool chest that are really helpful. Yes, the market's hot like it was in 1928, and everybody didn't want to have the fear of missing out, and they jumped in. And of course, they, as the tide went out, we found out they had no clothes on. Well, we don't want that to happen again. So income generating could be a tremendous tool, which I believe, as you all do, so you can get a nice income. So every day on a Monday or a Tuesday of the first of the month, there's a check waiting in the mailbox not having to worry about the markets, but enjoying your retirement, which every retiree should deserve and wants.
So do you think the reason the markets are so high now is because people are a little less fearful now? They're starting to get a little more confident of the economy and the markets and maybe the vaccine. Is that what you're hearing when you talk to clients every day in New Jersey, even though you guys are still, partially locked down, is at least the way I like to think of it?
We are locked down and people have a lot of money coming in. The stimulus checks are here, but there's nowhere to go. So they get the energy and they see the stocks going up and they say, as Jeff would say, the fear of missing out, not jumping in, and they want to start playing the market. And this could be dangerous. And I agree with you, Dave. Everybody wants to make $1 million. As I said to my clients the other day, everybody wants cake and ice cream. They just don't want the cholesterol or the fat. And I think that's what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Perhaps it could come up.
Yeah, great way to put it.
Dave, can I plug Scotty's book? Can I plug his book?
Absolutely, go right ahead because
all right,
it's a great
Scotty,
book.
listen, I keep this book in my reception area right next to mine, and I appreciate the compliments, but share with us, what are the 1 or 2 top lessons folks can learn from your book on learning those angles and avoiding those mouse traps?
Number one, I think as working with clients, I want to know if they have ears that they want to listen or ears they want to talk. Do they have the right mindset? Do they want to learn what's going on? And what I mean by that, Jeff, with the art of, I believe, our business or my firm and your firm is understanding the client completely, understanding that their goals and their dreams. And on top of their goals and their dreams, without understanding taxes and understanding where it goes when you pass away, a big piece of people's portfolios or their mindset, or when they sleep well at night, are they sleeping well? By understanding how the 3 blind mice, the accountant, the lawyer, and the financial planner, are they really working together? Obviously, they're all good. The problem is they have their own agenda. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest challenge, which is why I wrote the book. And I think I wanted people to get a lot of tools inside the book on not just fluff. There's a lot of stuff in there, I promise you. And if they read it, they'll understand the traps that are set for them, the internal fees and costs and taxes and legal expenses they can avoid.
Well, Scotty, I couldn't agree with Jeff more. It's a fantastic book, 3 Blind Mice by Scott McLean, financial advisor extraordinaire from New Jersey. We're out of time. Thanks so much for being back with us and being a friend of the Income Generation. And you stay with us. We're not done yet. We have more to come right here in a moment on the Income Generation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and for one, I certainly wish that I could grow my hair like that. Those days are long over. But back to April. April come she will indeed. For all the great things that April can bring, it also brings that infamous date, April 15th, tax day. Now, some people make a game of waiting till the very last minute to file, while others do it for strategic reasons. Whenever you file your own taxes over the next few months, it's important to be aware of the many changes brought on this year by the pandemic, as well as other factors brought on by the Secure Act. As I mentioned before, these include changes to your deductions, your tax credit options, changes to the rules on IRA contributions or withdrawals, changes to student loans and small business loans, and changes to rules around RMDs. Your tax specialist can help you understand all your options, while the right financial advisor can help you create a plan that helps you strategically minimize the tax burden year after year, geared toward retirement income and designed to help you achieve your specific retirement goals. I'd like to take a moment and thank our guests today, Ed Slott and Scott McLean, as well as my co-host Jeff Small, for joining us today right here on the Income Generation. But most importantly, I want to thank you, our new and returning viewers. Remember, if you're close to or you're in retirement and you're concerned about your money, it's essential you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week. The Income Generation is now available on YouTube. Subscribe to The Income Generation so that you never miss a show. You can watch all your favorite episodes now in one place, as well as catch up with your favorite financial guests. Subscribe now to the Income Generation channel on YouTube. I'm David Scranton, founder of the Retirement Income Store. If you're in or near retirement, are you certain you have the right retirement plan in place? Do you want to help ensure your nest egg will last you all throughout retirement? Take our retirement review quiz and find out in 5 minutes or less if you're doing everything you can to achieve a more successful retirement.
Don't waste any more time. Visit myfreeretirementreview.com to find out if you have the right retirement strategy in place.